Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Global Women and Security Alliance 2020, our virtual series. My next guest, Miss Carola Tribe. She's the Operations Associate at Anvil Group, United Kingdom. Miss Carola, welcome to the show.
Hello, welcome, Chuck.
I am really excited to talk to you about.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk about COVID-19 safety and security in ground transportation.
So first, it's important to state that the chances of being involved in a road traffic accident far outweigh those of being involved in a security-related incident. The vast majority of us use ground transportation on a daily basis, whether that is for shopping for groceries, commuting to work, visiting friends and family, dropping off kids at school, or simply visiting a gym, a park, or a church, you name it. With so many people on the road, safety is still the biggest concern, and this needs to be our number one priority. This is easier in a familiar place or area where we know the roads, we know the rules, and can predict, at least most of the time, the likely behavior of other commuters in traffic. However, this changes when we travel to an unfamiliar destination, especially when traveling to a foreign country, for example. Personally, I've been driven in a few countries and they're all very different. For instance, driving on the left-hand side of the road in the UK, which I do on a daily basis, and then driving in the US on the right-hand side of the road. In addition, there are slightly different driving guidelines in the US than in the UK, not to mention the larger US car sizes, the steering wheel on the opposite side, and then here in the UK, the narrow roads and the specific UK roundabout rules. These are all things to consider when driving, and this is already a big change to routine driving. So every year, almost 1.3 million people lose their lives on the world's roads, and many millions more are seriously injured. Shocking as these statistics already are, the number of incidents is increasing in some regions, especially areas that are becoming regular business traveler destinations.
Well, I hear you. I've traveled around the world a bit. I gave it a shot at driving in the UK. I just could not wrap my head around it. I did not feel safe. And I just started taking the wonderful London cabs, even a better experience, right? So this is very interesting.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about some of the dangers involved here? I think during COVID, we're adding to this people that have been not driving for 6 months, right? And if it's a young driver, that's certainly problematic. You also have anxiety. People are nervous about things. They're concerned about their safety. Tell us about some of those dangers we're going to face.
So again, regardless of the country, road safety is key. From wildlife on the road in Sri Lanka, for example, where I've been driven, when elephants are sharing your road, it's quite surprising to come around a bend and then there's this grey giant in your path. To road conditions, to unfamiliar traffic patterns, special driving rules of the roads, busy roads, with a mix of huge numbers of cars, motorcycles, bikes, pedestrians, other vehicles like tuk-tuks and so on. And there are also some security issues which travelers and sometimes even employers may not have thought of. For example, simply being a foreigner in another country, precautious areas within cities which should be avoided, or civil unrest, poverty, and the bigger issues such as terrorism, political instability. And then add to that is the risk of opportunistic crime, carjackings, and assaults on the road. And the roads can be very dangerous places for travelers indeed. Due to the high risk level of some regions, or possibly the profile of a particular traveler, companies and travelers themselves need to ensure that their ground transportation is vetted for safety every single time.
Now, are women more vulnerable?
Traveling in some countries as a woman or as a member of the LGBTQ community, especially when you're traveling alone, can prove even more challenging and brings a whole new set of risks to the mix. These problems are diverse, from petty crime and problematic cultural issues to sexual harassment and violent crime. The challenges exist and show very little evidence of abating. A female employee might already feel uneasy about traveling alone overseas, especially when they are completely immersed in an unfamiliar culture. It can be easy to react instinctively with anger or fear by ignoring the risks and the culture in country, and this may lead to further difficulties in a rush to get home as quickly as possible. The greatest aid to personal security is recognizing and understanding the risks, developing more situational awareness, and learning certain behavior techniques to combat sticky situation. So, coming back to the initial question, is there a need for security in ground transportation? Yes, there is. Statistically, ground transportation is the most dangerous part of a journey, especially if one is traveling to unfamiliar places, perhaps to a foreign country. And for companies who send staff on regular business trips, this is a great opportunity to retrain frequent travelers so they are aware of the potential dangers. No organization wants to intentionally put their travelers in harm's way. Simple things such as, has the taxi or bus company become very relevant all of a sudden?
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Are travelers who use ground transportation, are they even more vulnerable now, considering COVID-19?
Yes. So most travelers will now consider COVID-19 as their main risk factor and might forget about any other risks or perhaps not pay as much attention to them, as COVID-19 is now at the forefront. However, despite COVID-19, all other security risks which were around pre-COVID are still there. Nothing has changed. Roads are still dangerous. Although traffic may have decreased, quieter roads often lead to more wildlife venturing out and the potential of being more aggressive or more confident to use the roads. So we need to be mindful of that. Other threats, especially in high-risk countries, have not changed. The threat of terrorism, crime, kidnap, civil unrest, and potentially anti-Western sentiments still remain high. And current advice from health organizations and governments is to use alternative means to get from A to B where possible in order to avoid crowds and lots of people. And they suggest such as walking or cycling. This may be feasible when infrastructure exists for walking and cycling, but not in others. Many may not be confident cyclists, and some have not been on a bike since childhood, maybe. E-scooters are another alternative, and they are on the rise, but many are still getting used to them on our roads and sidewalks, so we need to be careful of that as well. It may also not be safe to walk necessarily everywhere. Be sure to check your destination to see if these methods are practical and safe. And additionally, governments have advised to use the most direct route to a destination. This sounds very logical and sensible, but may not be recommended for VIPs or senior executives, because having a predictable route may put that person at risk from criminals or kidnappers or the like.
So what can we do if we need to organize secure transportation for ourselves or for someone in our company? There's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things to consider. You know, my first consideration now might be, is the Uber or Lyft people, are they cleaning their cars properly because of COVID? We just don't know.
Yes, that is a good question. And often travelers, whether they are traveling for business purposes or for leisure, focus primarily on costs, ease of booking, and how fast they'll move from A to B. This does not necessarily apply to only traveling, but also to our daily lives, and affects the choice and the means of ground transportation. When traveling, one should be mindful and not simply hop into any odd taxi or rideshare, especially not at a foreign destination. And especially if you are unfamiliar with the country, the language, the culture, and the potential risks for that area. So pre-booked transportation is hugely recommended, and in some cases an absolute must for business or for leisure travel, especially in high-risk countries. So for business travelers, it's always advisable to use vetted transportation network companies. This ensures they abide to industry safety standards and regulations, which have now slightly changed with COVID-19, as they need to make sure that their cars are clean and get disinfected regularly. So some of the basic things to watch out for are up-to-date insurances and in-date licenses, that the personnel receive regular training and health checks, and that the vehicles are properly maintained. Some destinations can be challenging from a security perspective, so robust ground transportation might be needed depending on the destination, because there might be civil unrest, crime, and other factors. This may then include the use of armored vehicles or close protection services. And a thorough risk and threat assessment of the destination is recommended to determine the level of security needed. So let's take Turkey for an example. In some areas, a vetted driver may be enough. However, the border areas of Syria require a much different security arrangement for ground transportation, which would include close protection services. And here are a few tips for ground transportation when traveling for leisure and business. So ensure you are using a respectable company, which is licensed. Often hotels or the tourist information can assist with this. Look out for any official badges or permits, and take note of logos and colors of taxis and buses, for example, and stay awake and alert at all times, and keep close control over your luggage and your bags, and know your ultimate stop, know where you're going and where you want to exit. And if public transportation services becomes too crowded, just exit, just leave it, get out of there.
Give me some general advice to those who have to travel in the world of COVID-19. Now that's problematic. Yeah, you have your cars, you have your air, trains. I mean, a route can be not just ground transportation, but it can involve all kinds of different things. Even in Europe, a lot of ferries, things like that.
Absolutely. So not everyone is fortunate enough to own a car, and hence people rely heavily on public transportation, shared transportation or ride-hailing. Being dependent on public transport such as subways or trains or buses, especially at the moment, can be very trying due to the COVID-19 restrictions and the potential risk of infection. So journeys to work on public transportation can be long, and exposure to health risks is therefore greater. Consequently, it may be safer to work from home, although this is not always possible. So car sharing with a colleague from work might be an option, and this way the exposure to other people is being reduced. So there are a few useful tips and hints, and it's often the simple things that can already make a huge difference. So, for example, leave plenty of time at the start of your journey for any enhanced screening purposes which might have been put in place. Social distance where possible. This can be tricky in crowded travel hubs, so be mindful of that. Adopt required and appropriate PPE at all times, and this may be different in other countries, so please check before you travel. And face coverings or masks should be replaced regularly, especially in high humidity. So throughout your journey, and once you have finished your journey, wash your hands for more than 20 seconds with soap and water. And if this is not available, use hand sanitizers containing a high percentage of alcohol. And it's advised that you always carry one in your handbag, in your pocket, or any antibacterial wipes for that regular use. And be conscious of touching your face, your mouth, your nose, eyes with your hands, and making contact with other surfaces. So I have some slides with some of the hints and tips for when you're opting for the use of a car or the use of a taxi or traveling by bus and coach. There are a few simple things that you can do when opting for a car. The use of a taxi or traveling by bus or coach. So I've recently been driven all the way from Germany to the UK, and all the countries I had to travel through, i.e. the Netherlands, Belgium, and France, were on the UK quarantine list. So in order to avoid a 2-week quarantine upon my arrival back in the UK, I had to ensure that we did not exit the car in any of those 3 countries. Now, that is a 5-hour journey, and little things at the beginning of our journey to make sure everyone uses the bathroom before starting a journey become very important. So that you can avoid toilet breaks and don't have to exit the car. And we made it. We made it from Germany all the way to the UK without needing to exit the car. And here you have it. I hope that these few slides helped with you getting around and traveling in this rather trying times of COVID-19.
Carola, I found those slides in your stories very interesting. I never would have considered being able to quarantine yourself in a car as you cross through countries. What a great way to work around it and be safe at the same time. Now, do you feel that individuals are aware of the security risks when it comes to ground transportation? And what would you say employers typically inform their employees of regarding the potential risks? I'm a sort of guy that does his own research. It's great if my boss tells me what to look out for, but I want to dig a little deeper myself too.
So your company, your employer should make you aware of all the security risks when traveling, whether employees are driving themselves to a meeting across town or are utilizing the services of an authorized transportation network company in another time zone or another country. Companies have the duty of care to ensure that everything possible has been done to ensure their safety throughout the duration of that journey, no matter how short or how long. And each company and each organization has the duty of care to their employees, and whether they have specified the mode of transport to be used or even pre-arranged directly with the provider, or have allowed the traveler to make their own choice. The legal responsibility is the same and does not waver. Simply put, duty of care is an organization's obligation to protect its people from risk. Legally, employers must abide by the relevant health and safety and employment laws. And now a new and additional player in all of this is COVID-19 and all the additional safety measurements companies have to consider when their employees return to business travel. The safety of the individual is vital, and failing to implement and to demonstrate that appropriate measures are in place to effectively manage duty of care responsibilities can have significant financial and reputational implications for an organization. So, properly training, educating, and informing employees on the potential risk is equally important as the internal due diligence for the contracted transportation vendors. The ultimate responsibility lays squarely with the organization, and travelers should be provided with an advanced pre-travel information deck and possibly training, especially when traveling abroad. This will enable them to have all the information needed to make the most educated decision possible.
So what can I as a traveler do? There's business travelers which have some help from their employers, right? And I'm just a regular guy. I don't have all this extra information and help. So what can I do?
Yes, it's not always easy being a business traveler or being a traveler, and to be aware of all the risks and to follow and abide by the corporate safety training and guidance. So the challenge that frequent travelers often feel they know it all, that bad things never happen to them, and they feel very confident and comfortable when traveling to their destinations. Travelers, especially the more seasoned ones, can often become complacent to risk, worrying more about their connecting flights, arriving at the hotel at a decent hour, or squeezing in sightseeing, shopping, or leisure time. And travelers are used to the convenience of on-demand services in their personal life, and they expect the same level of simplicity in their business lives as well. And anything that makes these process difficult will merely discourage them from complying. They may choose an easy option and let their guard down. So travelers need to make sure that they avail themselves to the protective measures a company puts in place to safeguard them. Also, that they are mindful of their surroundings and actions, and that behaviors do not expose them to additional risks. As I've mentioned before, travelers might be subject to additional risks simply because they are female or a member of the LGBTQ community. I've recently looked after a traveler for whom I organized secure ground transportation to ensure all security measurements were in place for the trip. Ultimately, the client decided to cancel the entire trip because they felt uneasy about the challenges at the location in question. In this case, it was a lone female traveler due to leave for Pakistan. In cases like this, it would be better to cancel the trip than put an employee in any danger or unnecessary risk. Typically, employers understand this and accept this course of action because they want to ensure that their employees are safe.
So there's a lot of moving parts here with COVID, but what, if anything, has changed for employers and companies sending their staff on business trips? Because really, shouldn't they have been doing most of these things before COVID, right?
Yes, it is more challenging now to send staff on business trips in the current situation of COVID-19, and they would need to consider the potential risk it has on their employees. These days, it's not just a question of cost versus benefits of sending a member of staff on a trip, whether that is international or domestic. Even a quick client visit down the road is now being scrutinized when in the past it was commonplace. A virtual meeting is often the solution and can most of the time be done from the safety of home. So sending staff on an international business trip is for most employers out of the question due to the country level restrictions, the shortage of flights, and other methods of transportation being limited. However, for some employers, a virtual meeting is not an option due to the nature of the business. For them, organizing a safe trip can be challenging, even if the trip is within their own country. And employers need to consider the means of transportation now, whether it's a car or a plane or trains, and which one is deemed the safest option for an employee at the moment. And each staff member has a unique risk profile, and not everyone feels comfortable to drive, or others may not wish to fly under any circumstances at the moment. And then other risk factors also play a huge role, like the current situation with civil unrest and riots and demonstrations in a number of cities, or environmental impacts such as severe weather, or even the elections in various countries. So prior to the pandemic, these security risks were considered, but now the health risks of their staff plays a much larger part in the process. As a lot of companies want to save money now during this rather difficult time, and as they are focusing on making it through this tough episode, their attention to ensuring employees are provided with secure ground transportation on their business trips could potentially suffer. The danger of arranging cheap and easy transportation for staff without taking all of the health and safety measures into account is greater than ever, I would argue. This is where the advantages of working with a partner organization such as my employer become clear. Our role is to help and advise and provide recommendations. We are here to find the best and most economical solution for our clients. We have implemented a COVID-19 specific set of standard operating procedures for all our teams on the ground to ensure that our clients and our travelers are safe and secure during their essential business travel.
Miss Carola Tribe, she's the Operations Associate for the Anvil Group, United Kingdom. We've been speaking about COVID-19 safety and security and ground transportation. Miss Carola, very, very good information. A lot of things I had not thought about. I think possibly in the end, I may get out my old skateboard out of storage, and I might just stick to that. That might be the safest possible transportation for me. But until then, we will certainly use the advice of the Anvil Group, and make sure you guys contact them right here. Here's our contact slide. Info@anvilgroup.com, and anvilgroup.com is the website. Ms. Carola, very, very good information, and I want to thank you so much for coming on the 2020 Women in Security virtual conference.
Thank you very much, Judd. Thank you for having me.